welcome. And again, sorry for the redundancy of showing you where the location is, but if you must, you can find all of these videos, right? If you're watching it on YouTube right now, of course you already know this, but if you haven't yet, of course you can just type in Chris Verrett or Crabapple Designs. That is my company. And I pretty much record everything. And in fact, I try to keep it pretty organized year by year. Some of the good ones I kind of keep hanging around, such as some people ask me, what is that rain stick you keep talking about that you sold the patents to and actually made quite a lot of money off of? Basically using these programs and 3D cutters and laser printers and all these different things. So a lot of them were like, hey, I want to see the product that you keep talking about. So, I showed you. But I often make PR videos for San Antonio College, and I've been doing this for quite some time. Actually, I found out the other day that I was one of the first users to sign up for, where was it? More? Yeah. Joined in August 8th, 2006. By the way, it came out in 2006, right? YouTube. Anyway, I didn't know that. I wasn't trying to be ahead of the time, but I have had this account for a really long time. But if you just type in Crabapple Designs or Chris Verrett, I don't know if it works with Christopher Verrett, but again, you shouldn't have any trouble finding these videos. You'll notice in the playlist I have all the old videos as well, right? So definitely hats off there. Yes, I've been trying some AI stuff out to see if it actually causes more clicks. Funny enough, it does, right? 430 views versus 89 views. It's kind of funny how much the thumbnail will get you, right? Anyway, kind of my own social experiment. Just in case you're wondering, why does that guy have long hair? Well, I used to have really long hair down to here, right? Until they told me I couldn't have it, right? Anyway, kind of discriminatory, but hey, I'm growing it back anyway. So, anyway, to digress, let's talk about some Photoshop, and first things first, let's go ahead and open up those two scanned files that we had. So in opening Photoshop, just to be aware, keep in mind that some of the UI or the user interface is a little bit different, right? So for instance, on the Mac, it'll be at the top, but it'll be the same as Windows. Windows, it'll actually be a part of the window itself. So really there's the only difference there. When I click open, we'll go to my drive, CVP, and of course open up those two JPEG files. In my case, I'm going to select both and open, and it should open actually two separate tabs, right? In my case, tab number 1 and tab number 2. One of the first things that we can do is of course zoom out, which is Control -sign or Command -sign if you're on Mac. But you can zoom in as much as you'd like and zoom out as much as you like too. If you have a trackpad, of course, you can use the trackpad as well. That being said, the first thing we actually want to do is make sure that this is the right size, right? So Command R or Control R. Now don't get me wrong, I keep recording these, but keep in mind sometimes the recording doesn't work. You might want to take notes on this one. You might even want to follow along if you're just that quick. I do go pretty quick because it is actually in fact recorded, right? So just in case. Anyway, that being said, Command R brings up this little ruler that you see at the top and the side. And by default, you'll notice actually some of these tools are not in there, right? You may actually have to click on this little guy over here, top right corner, and make sure that it's an Essentials or an Essentials Classic. I think by default, usually it's in like Core Tools, and very often you're like, where's the tools you're talking about, right? So again, Essentials Classic or Essentials is definitely the tool set that I'm using in Photoshop. So just kind of verify that first. You'll notice by default when you bring something in, it immediately wants to crop it for you. That's cool, but we don't need to right now. In fact, we want to make sure it's the right size first. So in our case, well, I may want to line up the drawing first. So yeah, maybe they're right. Let's do some crop first. Crop is found right here, right? It's usually that symbol that looks like, basically two fingers coming together like that. Or it's the letter C. So if I just hit the letter C, of course it'll enact the crop tool. Now by default, I'm just going to more or less try to get it to line up, right? It's going to add some white space, and in my case, actually, I have it set to black background right now so I can tell better. And it looks like I'm going to need to straighten it up a little bit. So of course cropping first and dialing that in. After you do, press enter, and clearly we have some more stuff on the page that we don't need. So in our case, let's check the size first. I'll go to image, image size, and you'll see that there's also canvas size. don't be too confused. Those are actually two different things, even though they put them next to each other for some reason. But let's check the image size first. You should see, of course, that 300 DPI that we scanned it in, and actually pretty close to the width and height of those 10 inches that we needed, right? Of course, make sure that it's in inches. And to be fair, I could type in 10 inches and 10 inches to make sure that that image actually is 10 inches, and especially when we print it out and want this to be the exact same size as our original, right? So in our case, let's also make sure that the canvas size is correct. And it's not. Oh my gosh, well this one is, but this one's not quite there. Now in my case, it is going to keep it, what's the word, proportional. So let's make sure that when I change this to 0, that it stays at 10 by 10. Proceed. And voila, we have a 10 by 10 image, both in image and on our canvas, right? Canvas being actually everything that's not the image, right? So if I were to go back to selection and turn off this layer, oh, as long as it's not locked, turn off this layer, this canvas is 10 by 10, whereas this image is also now 10 by 10, right? Just in case you didn't know what I was actually doing there. However, first things first, let's get rid of some of this dark black space that isn't actually a part of the composition. So what can we do? I mean, well, there's a couple of things we can do. First thing, we can actually use our stamp tool. So you may notice there's actually kind of a lot in there, right? There's almost maybe too much of certain areas. So we'd maybe want to dial those in. So for instance, especially in Annalise, we can do Command T for transform, or Control T if you're on Windows, right? So if I do Command T, it's asking for a layer. Do make sure that you click on the layer that you do want to transform, and I'll do Command T, and immediately we get kind of this box around it. Also, I should note that if you hold spacebar, you can immediately pan as well, right? That's a game changer to say the very least. Again, Command plus sign to zoom in, and Command minus to zoom out. Or Control. Obviously Command is the Mac version, Control is the Windows button, right? Just in case you're wondering, why does it keep saying Control and Command? They actually are the same key, at least as far as the keyboard is concerned. But maybe we need to line that up a little bit better. So right now you can kind of see the edge of her page. And again, we already scaled the canvas. So I'm going to hold Shift to keep that proportional, and I'm basically just dial that in as close as possible. Now she knows hers a little bit better. Now if I don't hold Shift, very scary, right? I can definitely unproportionalize the photo pretty quick. So again, make sure that you're holding Shift, right? And of course to keep things proportional, right? But that's looking pretty good. I mean, we'll fake it till we make it, as Escamilla would say. I don't want to cut off her name, so I do want to get that in there. And maybe I do need to rotate it, which is kind of nice. I can still rotate in this. And we can dial it in pretty close, right? As you can see, pretty close. Let's get it maybe a little bit bigger. And we can definitely at least get rid of the unwanted sort of black and white spaces that we had. And that's looking pretty good, so I'll hit Enter and go back to my regular selection tool. Oh, my bad. Again, you can always do Command Z or Edit, Undo. You can't even mess up in the digital world. Another reason I love the digital world. Can't really mess up. You can always edit, undo. But some of my lines are actually looking a little funky, especially from that turn I did, but that's looking actually pretty straight, no? Let me show you a little bit of an advanced tool. I'm going to go back to Command T, right? On my layer, Command T. And if I hold Option, I can actually stretch this still. However, that only works if I hold the Command key in the Mac or the Alt key in Windows, right? So I can actually dial that in a little bit straighter. You see what I mean by that? That straight line at the top, that triangle? See how it's kind of funky? The scan kind of got a little warped? Well, I can kind of unwarp it, right? And at least dial it in a little bit straighter and hit Enter, right? So I'm already cleaning up the drawing and making it a little bit straighter. Now let's talk about the color. So now that we got at least the right size, now we got the right, you know, the alignment of the lines and things like this, let's get actually the background, right? Because that's actually looking kind of a little iffy, right? Maybe we accidentally got some of the transparency of the paper, maybe we messed up, maybe we didn't, but we definitely don't have to settle for that. So the first tool that you could use is curves. I don't know why it's called curves, but it's called curves. If you go to image, and oh no, actually this is a great problem to have because you might run into this exact problem too. In fact, what we need is adjustments, and we'll notice that adjustments is grayed out. What that means is, well, I either need to select the layer that I do want to change, so I'll go to image, there it is. But another reason that can happen is if this is not a converted image, right? So we can right click on this layer and I can actually convert it to a smart object. Sometimes that is necessary. Again, sometimes not. In our case, I went ahead and converted it anyway. You won't notice really any differences there. However, when we go to images, you'll notice that adjustments is definitely open, and we don't need those for anyway. So we have our image. I'll select the layer itself, and then I'll go to adjustments and go to curves. Really, we're going to just stick with these 4 right here for today. All right, so curves first. I'm going to hit curves. And this one is pretty magical, I'm not going to lie, but it does have a black eyedropper tool and a white eyedropper tool. And to be completely honest with you, in my 15 years, I still don't know what this middle button really does, so don't worry about it. But the black eyedropper tool, it controls the black point of our image. So if I hit this and I accidentally hit the white, it's going to select every pixel in this entire composition, and it's going to go, hey, you want this point to be white or this point to be black? And it's going to immediately change that. As you can see, this is definitely not what we want to our image. However, it does start to reveal that I should press down my paper a little bit harder, doesn't it? Those are all air pockets of the image, right? Lo and behold, it's actually there inside of the image. But let's try that again. The shortcut key is Command M, as in mom, and I can bring up curves as well. When I use the black eyedropper tool, I'm going to select the most black, or the black point of this composition. I'm going to say that that's probably this right here. That's definitely the darkest element I see. But if I zoom in, actually that might be the darkest element I see. I'm going to select that one and zoom out. And not too shabby. It's looking a little bit more crisp, a little bit more contrast. Now let's take our white point, and I'm going to select the closest thing to white, or what I want to turn white. So in my case, it might be this little anomaly. It might not. That might actually be too dark. But you see this waviness that you might not see it in the projector so much, but you can kind of see the variance of colors, right? It's not one color, right? It's actually a multitude of about 8 to 12 colors actually in there. But if I select one, you'll notice it starts to make things a little bit brighter. If I select a few, right? If I really kind of get the darkness in there, or even that little anomaly. Now, it'll only change so much, but we can really start to make that pretty crisp, right? Almost kind of digitalize it, right? Not too bad. I still see some errors, and to be fair, that might actually be okay. They might be actually so small enough that this still feels human. In fact, I often say that, well, there's a reason Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 4 look so different from each other, and it's not the computing capacity of Pixar. What it is the level of detail in Toy Story 4 and the level of detail in Toy Story 1, right? If you've ever watched Toy Story 1, you may have noticed during Andy's birthday party, those are actually all Andy, but different colors, right? They didn't have the computing power, so they just changed the color of Andy and they made him go really fast, and it looked like a bunch of different children, right? Go watch it again, I dare you, right? It really is all Andy. But in the fourth one, the reason it's so much better is because they actually added the mistakes that are found in reality. They added the dirt on the toys, they added the bumps on the toys, they added kind of rubbing through the grass, and they added actually all the things that make it look real. And in fact, what makes it look real or perfect is actually imperfection. Most of reality is actually just teetering and tottering really close to perfection, not necessarily meeting it, right? If that makes sense. So don't get me wrong, what I'm trying to say here is sometimes that's actually wanted because it'll make this drawing look more human, right? Or perfect. Perfect is imperfection, at least in my eyes. In fact, you can't have perfection without imperfect. It's a paradox in itself. But in our case, let's say it was actually a mistake. Annalie's like, no, I didn't actually want that in there. So if that be the case, we could do a few things called the stamp tool or the letter S. If I hit the letter S, it's going to be like, hey, what layer do you want to do this on? Well, I want to do it to this layer, right? And in my case, I might need to smash these layers together. So I'm going to flatten them. So flatten image real quick, and it's going to turn it back into an image. But the reason Stamp Tool is so cool, and it looks like this, right? You'll see that we have the Clone Stamp Tool and a Pattern Stamp Tool. Make sure that you choose Clone Stamp Tool. I'll hold Option, and it's going to be like, hey, what point do you want to copy? Keep in mind your cursor shouldn't blink like that. I'm screen recording, so I get kind of a lot of anomalies. But basically it's going, hey, what do you want to copy in your image that is already there? And I'm going to say this, click, and then I'm going to say, well, use this little crosshair to basically copy what I don't have. You'll see that I can mess up for sure, right? But essentially you can copy the drawing, right? So for instance, let's see that again, playback. I'm going to use Option. On the Mac, I'm going to use Alt on Windows. And then as soon as I click, it's going to copy that position. So if I wanted to erase that and make it white, I could. Again, I'm using spacebar and basically just copying what I already have and replacing those mistakes. I kind of want to keep that line. It's kind of nice, right? Definitely human. But I may realize, oh, you know, I don't really want to keep these errors, so get rid of them, right? And of course, we can use the Stamp Clone tool in order to do so. Maybe that cut paper at the line, or the cut paper at the bottom, right? Maybe I want to reposition myself. I'll hold Option, click, and immediately click afterwards. I can also change this if I didn't want to be here forever. I can change the size of that, right? In order to copy a lot more, and copy it. But again, already cleaning up the drawing significantly, right? I almost wish we had the original. I guess we could open the original. But last but not least, what I would like you to do for the assignment is give us the inversion of it. I want to see the exact opposite of your first initial composition. So what I'm talking about, if we're looking at assignment 3 right now, assignment 4 is to flip it, to invert it, right? So everything that is black will turn white, and everything that is white will turn black, and everything in between will kind of be in between, you'll see. But very easy. Actually, we could just do Command I, but I want to show you at least where it's at. So if you go to Image, Adjustments, and you'll see Invert, right? Of course, once we do that, we'll see the inversion of it, and this is what we'll be printing out for Friday. That's it, right? So definitely not too shabby there. But notice how much had to go into that first. I did have to clean up the drawing. I had to make sure it was 10 by 10, and I had to remove some of the anomalies. Otherwise, we'd start to see kind of some white fuzzies inside of this black space. And it may reveal, ooh, you know, I forgot a portion. Maybe I use my stamp tool. I'll copy that and just copy it in. Right, I may want something a little bit smaller so I don't accidentally get that next box, right? I can zoom in and we can get rid of that. I'll hold Option. I want to copy this portion and I want to copy it here. Like magic, right? If I go too far, uh-oh, it's going to copy my image, so be careful, right? But let's try that again. I can also hold Shift to make completely straight lines if I want to. But we can still fix the drawing. As you can see, I still got some errors. So I may have to get a different spot, because it's only going to copy the rest of the drawing, right? So if the drawing's, you know, copying something that's wrong, it's going to copy it. I kind of like the errors there, though. It definitely makes it a little human, especially that small. But that's pretty much it. Last but not least, we got to print this guy. So that's looking pretty good. I mean, I could take it a step further and kind of mess with the levels. So adjustments, levels, brightness and contrast, definitely some of my favorite tools of all time. And kind of mess around. I mean, don't get me wrong, we don't have to settle for less, right? But if you're seeing too much like this, yeah, we might need to brighten it up a little bit, right? Maybe we want just a little bit of Toy Story 4, not necessarily all of Toy Story 4. But maybe I decrease contrast or increase contrast. Oop, maybe too much. I kind of want to keep some of that texture. After all, I do want it to look human, or that it came from one. And that's actually looking pretty good. All right, maybe a little bit less brightness. I kind of like that white line that goes through it, so maybe too bright. Maybe more contrast. Definitely mess around with it, because as you can see, it'll change one and the other, right, of the same drawing. So that's looking pretty good, but I need to print this out. So let's go ahead and do so. I'm going to File, Save As. And this is now where we'll turn the JPEG into a PDF, right? So you'll notice through the updates that now Photoshop has come up with its own PDF, which is great, because for a very long time it didn't have that. But we'll choose Photoshop PDF. In my case, I'm going to save it back onto CVP, and relabel it exercise 4, inverted. Right, just to keep track. In fact, it's actually really good practice that at the beginning of this, I can't stress this enough, putting actually the date is really helpful one day, especially when you're going through these files. 10 years from now and you're like, man, what did I do in graphics? Or what did I do in Studio? Those kinds of things. Is it really 9/9? Oh, it's 9/10. Whew, I'm a day behind. So I'm gonna label it that, press save, press OK. Now, here's where it can get a little tricky, at least for a PDF. I don't necessarily want the smallest file size, but I definitely want a high quality print. It'll keep the last setting that somebody used, so just kind of be aware of that. Like somebody previously on the school computer may have used smallest file size, and you're going for the best print. And you'll be like, oh man, why does mine look so blurry? Well, I accidentally forgot that somebody else switched it to smallest file size instead of maybe high quality print. So do make sure it is on high quality print. We'll save it. Are you sure you want to save it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I want to save it. We'll say yes. And I'll do Flavio. Oh my gosh, I just almost called you Flavio. We used to have this guy named Fabio. Anyway, we'll go ahead and do Fabian's next. And I'll do it really quick without talking. That way you can actually see how fast this process is. I do talk a lot. I do apologize. But let's check it out and make sure that it is correct. So I'm going to go over to CVP and make sure that that file is correct. And it's looking pretty good. This is, of course, the one that I'll want to print. On the school computer, I can't really show you this because personal computers are not allowed to print for some reason. How great is that? But on your side, you'll basically go to File, Print. And really, the most important thing to remember is to print it at a scale of what? 100%. Right? That is really all you got to know, at least for the school computers. However, I will say this is the name of the computer. MLC 502C GP1 color. Quite literally, you'll go through the printers on your settings. So see how mine says my computer at home. Obviously, you'll click on yours and you'll be looking for this GP1 right here, right? You'll notice that the name of the printer is the room that it's in, right? So if you see other rooms, don't get me wrong, if this one's like already troubled up, there is 645, and some of the printers, especially on some of these computers, are actually loaded to that large printer, and we have another one of these printers upstairs as well. So just in case this one runs out of ink, again, there's always an upstairs computer and an upstairs scanner, right? How many of you guys have never printed before in your life? Okay, good, because honestly, sometimes there's one or two. So for the most part, I would say work together on this, guys. This isn't like an isolated you against me project. It is definitely like share the wealth, share the knowledge. If somebody's getting it, follow them. Shadow them is what we call that, right? Is when you kind of shadow somebody and kind of see what they're doing, especially on the computer. However, increasingly, as the generations keep going, we seem to be getting better and better at computers, especially in our generation. So most of us have probably had a printing issue before, or realize it's not printing at the right scale or the right paper size. Obviously, choosing the right paper size will be critical for this one. Which size paper do you need to select? 10 by 10. Is there a 10 by 10 paper? No. So what do we select? We'll select tabloid, right? Or 11 by 17. Absolutely. Tabloid is another way of saying 11 by 17. So again, make sure that it's on 11 by 17. That way we can cut it out and be well on our way. Last thing I want to show, just because we do have 20 minutes, I want to show you that computer lab that I keep talking about upstairs. However, before we do that, and let me do Flavio's. Why do I keep saying that? Anyway, I do apologize. Let's do this one real quick, just to kind of go through the motions and for the sake of the video. So again, eventually you're doing this for speed, right? Not necessarily explanation. So again, bear with me. Take a break for a second. Try not to make any sounds though. We'll make that a 10 by 10. But eventually one day you'll do this as quickly as possible. Again, you probably know y'all's better than I do, so if I'm cutting something off, I do apologize. But obviously we do the video too, so you can pause it and see what's going down too. So. Sometimes you got to do curves again. Quick question, is that one post shade? Very good, we'll keep it then. And we're done. Right, so without the talking, actually it goes a lot faster. But again, take your time, especially if you've never used Photoshop before. I would imagine some of you at least maybe have opened it once in your life. It is a pretty popular program in that sense. But really, this is all we're doing, right? For that printout, that digital copy of Exercise 3. So, any questions about that so far, Photoshop-wise or scanning-wise or anything like that, guys? Obviously, this is a good chance because somebody might have the exact same question, and we can get it on the recording. So, no questions? Fair enough?
If anything, I'll just text you.
Fair enough. But, okay, I'll end the recording.